And so let's begin. All right, so this is Book 1, Part 2, the first lecture of Book 1, Part 2, the history of European nihilism. Make sure you download the notes, and let's begin. All right, so this is Will to Power. And this is section 6.1. And this is notes 62 to 68. Alright, section 6.1, notes 62 through 68. And this is on the quantum of humanness, right? On the quantum of humanness. It's important to recognize what Nietzsche is attempting to do. And it's important to recognize what he's attempting to do for at least two reasons. I can think of more, but for now, at least two reasons. One, in previous sections, Nietzsche talked about modern time, right? What does it mean to be modern worldview? What does it mean to live in a modern age? What is it to talk about the modern man, right? He's used this sort of vernacular quite a bit. And one of the points that I made in many videos ago that is going to come back to the forefront in this lecture was the notion of the world. By world, we have to make sure, as interpreters of Nietzsche, because he says it explicitly, that we're not equivocating in our notion of the world. And I said this before, not going to go through it a lot. First, our interpretation of the world has to be such that it is not the world of existence, the world of my physical embodiment, because that itself does not lead to nihilism for Nietzsche. For Nietzsche, it's the modern world that leads to nihilism. And I talked specifically about this at length before, about the equivocation. The question is, why does the modern world lead to nihilism? Well, we know that pessimism, we know that discouragement, we know that exhaustion, all of these concepts come as a product, as a consequence of positing the highest values and basically having those devalued. There's a lot to unflesh in that, but I've already spent 8 hours discussing that, right? So to sort of summarize that in a very tidy sense, it is the modern world that leads to pessimism, and the point is, it's the sense in which our modern world view, right, and this is what we're going to really sort of discuss today, our modern worldview leads us to this defeatist, discouraged, pessimistic state of affairs, right? We understand the process in which that unfolds for the individual, but now we're going to start to look at it socially, right? We're going to start to look at it socially. So secular numinist's point and his inclination to talk about egalitarian movements and so on, he talked about communist movements and socialist movements and so on, how there was good insight, right? The prediction that he said, I think secular numinist used the word prediction, was a very good point. So that's the first point. The second point on the importance of what Nietzsche is attempting to do, and this will get a little bit more profound, and we'll see this later in the video, is that when we're talking about, right, and this is important, when we're talking about a discouraged individual, and that individual lives in a community, and we're talking about a discouraged or pessimistic community, and that community is part of the social fabric of a nation, and that nation is a discouraged or pessimistic nation, and that nation is led by an individual, and we're talking about the discouraged individual, the pessimistic individual, right? This is a point in Nietzsche that I latched on to precisely at this point in pursuit of the dissertation. I'm not going to jump ahead too much. I just want to give you a taste of what's coming up, because this is going to be a pretty lengthy lecture. The point being that it's now. This is where we start to, where the rubber meets the road, quote unquote, right? This is where the analysis into Nietzsche, we're definitely going to be at a different level, right? Which is why he breaks it off into a different book, right? I don't think it was arbitrary in any sense that Nietzsche decided to say, okay, this is the beginning of Book 1, Part 2, right? Now we're going to start to really see the history of Europe, and the history of Europe's nihilism. That's the title of the chapter, right? So we're not just going to be looking at nihilism in a conceptual sense, right? We're going to be looking at the historical unfolding of this concept within the society, within the social nexus of Europe, right? We're at a deeper level, right? So with that, let's start to rock and roll on a deeper level. Okay, so what I did was I divided these concepts into columns. The modern man in one sense, and then this idea of the quantum of humanness, right? And this idea of quantum of humanness is the possibility, the exponential growth, all the good things, right? The leaps, not transcendence, right? Absolutely not transcendence, but the leaps, the resilience. I think he uses the term, the resilience of human nature. So, sort of, how do we make sense of both? What I'm going to do first is do the column. I'm not going to go back and forth, right? We'll do first the analysis of the column of the modern man. The second we see the term modern, Nietzsche uses the term modern in an almost pejorative sense. We should sense that now, right? By modern man, he doesn't mean the modern man that's tech-savvy, and no, he means modern man that's decadent, modern man that's pessimistic, modern man that's discouraged, modern man that is defeated by having his moral values collapse on themselves, right? And so on. So let's look at the modern man. Okay, the good man, right? The good man. And secular Numinists talked about this, right? The good man. This is a quote from Nietzsche, note 62, and I'll get my book ready soon. Corrupted and seduced by bad institutions. The good man is himself corrupted and seduced by bad institutions, right? The good man becomes self-deprecating. The good man, right, if we ascribe the label good man, and we see that that label applies to this individual, the question means, what is the justification, what is the meaning of the label? Right? By good man, when we say good man, what do we mean when we say good man? Because this concept of being a good man points to an individual. You're a good man. By being a good man, what do you mean? Right? Pretty obvious, right? The point is, when we talk about the good man, as Nietzsche says, the good man is, quote, corrupted and seduced by bad institutions, right? So there's a sense of corruption, right? This idea of seduction. If you think about the word corruption and you think about the word seduction, we recognize that there is a process of transformation in both corruption and seduction. So that if I'm talking about, if I'm talking about a state of affairs, this might be state of affairs 1 and this might be state of affairs 2. This is the process. Right? This is the process of transformation. I used to be this person, I became this person. When I became this person, I became labeled a good man. Pretty obvious. He says corruption and seduction, right? So that this process is a process of corruption and seduction. Right? This process of creating a good man comes as a consequence of corruption and seduction. So that corruption and seduction become, if you will, the catalyst, the means with which I become a good man. Okay. When we think of corruption and seduction, however, we think of corruption and seduction in terms of sort of like the siren. Right? The siren seduces me into the water to drown. Right? That there are ulterior motives, right? And we recognize immediately, we should at least recognize, and I'm going to take a lot, you should be on the same wavelength with me now, is that the act of corrupting, the act of seducing, we looked at an individual level before. And that was the relationship between the individual who ascribes to a value system and the individual who controls that ascription, right? So the terms that I used were, these are my terms, handle and the handler. The handler recognizes that insofar as the handled buys into the system of values, that system of values buys into ultimately the character of the handler, and thus he's able to subordinate the individual that's being handled, right? I can keep you in a position of dominance. In 12b, I forget exactly what it was, but I remember the note. In 12b, Nietzsche talks about the specific design of the system as a means to increase and maximize domination. So we recognize with individuals, with individual human beings, individual 1 and individual 2, that my relationship with another individual is one of dominance, one of subservience, and the way that I am able to control you is by getting you